Thank you so much, choir. Thank you, praise team. Thank you, all of y'all, for being a part of this service this morning. I don't know if I'm going to say something that's going to make some of you mad or not. I might. But you know what? I don't really worry a whole lot about that. I'll be honest with you. If I'm in God's Word and I'm preaching God's Word, it really, that's kind of secondary. I'm going to talk to you today about our political process. I'm going to talk to you about the political process, the best of times and the worst of times. I'm going to talk about these times in which we live. And I'm going to look back to look forward and see if we can learn some things about what happened in Judah and see if we can learn some things about going forward in our own country moving forward. You know, I have a message of hope today, even in these troubling political times, even in these times where we struggle to find someone to vote for that matches our values, in these times when we don't really understand why God is appointing the leaders over us that He has, and despite all the bad news about the economy, and the bad news about impending war, and the bad news about China holding a vast chunk of our national debt, all the bad news we hear, the Hurricane Matthew coming through, and all the hurricanes that cause billions of dollars worth of damage and natural disasters. It seems like every time you turn on the news, there's bad news, right? I want to give you some good news today as well. A picture of when it looked the worst for the nation and how God even used that time to build them up. From this famous passage in Isaiah chapter 6, verse 1 through 5, we see a picture of the greatness of God. No matter the circumstances, no matter the political situation, we see that we serve a great God. Are you happy about that this morning? That we serve a God that has never for once left His throne. A God that never for once has been shocked by the outcome of a political election. A God that knows us, that cares about us and meets our needs. In Isaiah chapter 6, begin reading with me in verse 1. In the year King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord sitting on a throne, high and lifted up, and the train of His robe filled the temple. Above it stood seraphim. Each one had 6 wings. With 2 He covered His face, with 2 He covered His feet, and with 2 He flew. And one cried to another and said, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is full of His glory. And the posts of the door were shaken by the voice of him who cried out, and the house was filled with smoke. So I said, Woe is me, for I am undone, because I am a man of unclean lips, and I dwell in the midst of a people of unclean lips. For my eyes have seen the King, the Lord of hosts. Friends, let me tell you something. Even in this day of King Uzziah's death, we can still see the Lord. Even in this day of political leaders falling by the wayside, of political leaders that don't match what we believe in, let me tell you, we can see the Lord high and lifted up in our lives. Listen, I heard a story of a man who went on the game show, and it was one of those, if you answer all the questions, you get $1 million. And it came down to the $1 million question. And if he answered the question with the first part and the second part, then he won $1 million. But if he only answered one part of it, then it was $500,000. So the host said, okay, what are we going to do? Do you want to know the first question or the follow-up question? He said, well, for $1 million, I'll answer the second question first. And the question was this: in what year did it happen? Uh-oh. In what year did things important happen? What do these 3 things have in common? 740 BC, King Uzziah died in Judah. He was a great king, and everybody wondered what they would do as a nation. It was a national crisis in the land of Judah. So that's 740 BC. That's the first date I want you to remember. Second date is 1775. You say, well, that's really close to when they wrote the Declaration of Independence. Well, it is. But over across the pond, in the group that we were setting up and getting up a fuss with, there was a guy named Charles Dickens that wrote a telling novel, a story called A Tale of Two Cities, where he said it is the best of times and it is the worst of times. And we can identify with that at times in our life. Now, 2016, What does 2016 mean? Does this mean the same thing as 740 BC or 1775 on the eve of the birth of the United States of America? Or in 2016, where we are about in about a week and a half, we're going to go and we're going to vote for our new leaders. And America, may I say, America is at a critical mass. It is at a crossroads. Now, if you think I'm going to stand up here and tell you who to vote for, you've lost your mind, okay? That is not my job. My job is to deal with the moral. My job is to deal with the spiritual. But it affects what we do in the voting booth. You believe that? What we believe affects how we vote. What we believe affects how we pick our leaders. What we believe affects how we hold our national and even local leaders' feet to the fire. The days in which we live can easily be described as the best of times and in the worst of times. We live in a day where technology goes around the world in just a moment. We live in a day where you can go to the store and buy anything you want. Very few people are hungry, right? Very few people are poor around us. There are a few, but it's much different than in 740 BC or 1775, where it was a hard way to live. But we could also say that we live in the worst of times as well. The worst of people come out many times. Let me make it clear from the outset. And I want you to know for sure, I love the United States of America. I consider myself a patriot. I consider myself one who stands when we have the national anthem. Y'all all right? If you got a problem, then hit the road, Jack, honestly. Colin Kaepernick, whoever you want to be. I don't care who it is. I don't care if it's my favorite athlete. I'd still feel the same way. You stand in honor of the national anthem of your land. Anyway, I consider myself a patriot. However, I think we would all say that we are deeply concerned about the state of affairs in the United States of America. Is that an honest, fair statement? That we are deeply concerned about the state of affairs. The average age of every great civilization in the history of the world was roughly 200 years. Did you know that? Every great civilization, the Roman civilization, around 200 years. Byzantine, around 200 years. The average, some are much less, but the average age is about 200 years. So we're on 40-something years of borrowed time, right? Almost 50 years of borrowed time on the average. That speaks a lot to the genius, and it speaks a lot to the God-fearing nature of our founding fathers. They want to wash that from the history books, by the way. They want to say that God didn't have anything to do with the formation of our nation. That those men were secularists. That's hard to say. They were worldly guys, I feel like Porky Pig. You can't say the right word, so he picks another one, right? That God didn't guide them. When you look at almost every document of the founding of our country, what is the common thread between all of them? God. God this and God that. Yes, they wanted God. They didn't want a national religion imposed upon the people of the United States of America, but they certainly did not want God to be taken out of the public arena. Amen. You will never convince me of that, no matter how hard you try. We should be deeply concerned about the state of affairs. And worse than that, we're repeating the mistakes of those civilizations that crashed and burned. One that comes to mind first is the rise and fall of the Roman Empire. What brought them down? Let's see if you recognize this. Sexual immorality was rampant. That sound familiar? Breakdown of the family. They did away with the family. Anybody could be a family. Doesn't matter if you're a boy, or a girl, or a a man and a dog, or whatever, it's all a family. That was right into the fall of the Roman Empire. Does it sound familiar, friends? I'm concerned about our country. I'm concerned about how we've gone down the wrong road, but I'm also optimistic that the Lord, if God's people can pull together and do what's right, that the Lord can make a change. You believe that? Are you optimistic about that? So the first point of my message is this: are we experiencing the worst of times? And if we look at this passage, they felt like they were in the worst of times. Are we experiencing the worst of times? Well, let's think about it. A negative economy. We cannot keep going the way we're going with the economy the way it is. Well, the amount of debt, the amount of deficit, the amount of all those things, the economy cannot keep going. And I was watching the debate between the two presidential candidates last Wednesday night. And they talk about their plans to get it right, and get it fixed. And independent economists say, neither one of you will make much of a difference in this. What do you plan to do about the economy? Can I tell you, I care about the economy. I don't want to be poor. I don't want our nation to collapse economically. But that's a secondary issue with me. It really is. I hope that we can be good stewards of the money, but there's a lot of different ideas and a lot of different ways to go about it, okay? And I'm not going to fuss and fight with over anybody about the handling of the economy. Secondly, national disasters. We think of hurricanes, we think of tornadoes, we think of earthquakes and all the things that just happen. And it seems like they're happening more and more and more frequently than usual. And statistics bear that out. I'll let you look that up. How about this? Absence of leadership and integrity in our country. That's a real problem. From the White House to the Congress House to the State House, we have leaders that we have elected, and you may not have voted for them, but we have elected them. We have leaders that lack integrity in public office. In our nation's past, when things would get kind of sticky, maybe we're headed to war with Germany, or maybe we're headed to war with Japan, or maybe we're going to Vietnam, or maybe we're doing something, or maybe there's a Great Depression, or maybe there's something, just a bunch of different things that could happen. In our nation's past, when we'd experienced those tough times, there would always be calm voices out there. There would be voices of statesmen, whether you like their politics or not. There would be people who were leaders who would come and would guide us through those tough times. Right? Am I right or am I wrong? I don't think we have that. I can't find that voice of calm and voice of reason and voice of leadership, no matter where I look as a whole within our country. If it was there, if there was that calm voice, look at me. If there was that reasonable statesman voice, I think the media would assassinate them and have them out of there in 10 minutes. Am I right or am I wrong? I'm just talking plain with you. There's negative economy, there's national disasters, there's an absence of leadership and integrity. I paint a bad picture. There's still the threat of terrorism in our country. You think that threat is over with? It is not. There are people sitting around right now thinking about how they can destroy at the very fabric of our country. It did not end on September the 11th, 2001. It is still there. But the biggest problem I see in our country right now, and I hinted on it just a moment ago, is the breakdown of the family. The family has been and will continue to be the cornerstone of any society. And when families collapse, the nation will collapse behind it. And it seems like some people just want to see that happen. I don't think they want to see the nation collapse, but they want to see a family become a thing of the past. An outdated relic of times gone by. That this used to be what we do, but we don't do that anymore. So are these the worst of times? That's the question. Well, let's go back to 740 BC that we talked about a moment ago. When this passage was written, Israel was facing very similar days. They were facing a national crisis, the death of their great and benevolent King Uzziah. King Uzziah came in and he issued reforms. He was a great leader. He would be on Mount Rushmore of Judah. He was a great leader. He was one of those statesmen that made just a huge difference. And in the year that he died, that's not insignificant that Isaiah wrote this in the year that King Uzziah died. It would be easy to say that King Uzziah may have been one of the greatest leaders the world has ever seen. He had integrity, he had morals, he had scruples, he had benevolence to his people. And even in verse 1, even when it seemed like it was the worst of times, look what Isaiah said again. In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord sitting on his throne, high and lifted up, and the train of his robe filled the temple. Listen, I don't believe that we're living in the worst of times. And let me tell you why. Because just like in the year King Uzziah died, we can see the Lord high and lifted up. Amen. The Lord is still on his throne. I believe that any time the Lord is on his throne, it is still the best of times. No matter what our eyes tell us, no matter what our ears tell us. So that's number 2. We are experiencing the best of times. Let me tell you why. That sounds like I'm about to blow sunshine, and I am a little bit, but there's some qualifications to that. You see, it is the best time, first of all, to seek and to see God. To see and to seek God. It is the best time. When troubles come, that is the best time to see and to seek God. That was the best time for Isaiah, right? Uzziah died. King Uzziah died. He's a great man. There's a great tragedy. What are we going to do? Well, in that very year, he saw Jesus. He is the best time in our lives to see and seek God. You know, most of us don't seek the Lord when times are good. Am I right or am I wrong? When times are good, we kind of put God over in the corner and say, Lord, I'll get you when I need you. I'll call on you when I need you. But let something bad happen. Let a national tragedy happen. My church in Arkansas was filled the Sunday after September 11th. We had to bring out chairs. People were weeping at the altars. You bring out a crisis, and that's when people turn to God. Doesn't make it right. Just makes it what it is. It makes us in our human nature. We're just not really wired that way. We turn to God when the bottom falls out. You know, I think it was in that dark day of Israel, the day when they lost their great leader, that Isaiah saw the light of God. Many people were, by the way, most historians tell us that Uzziah didn't die of old age. There was palace intrigue, and he was assassinated. He was poisoned, I believe. Most historians think that way. So that makes it even worse. How many of you were alive when John F. Kennedy, and can remember when John F. Kennedy was shot? A lot of you. A lot of you. That was a bad day, wasn't it? Because somebody had taken your nation's leader and had just blown his brains out in front of every God and everybody in Dallas, Texas. That's kind of how they were feeling with King Uzziah. Here was a great man that was finally turning us around, and somebody comes along and does this to us. The bottom had fallen out. So many people in Israel were walking around in sackcloth and ashes, mourning the death of their leader, and they were saying, this is the worst of times. It can't get any worse. Well, Isaiah, the prophet of God, the preacher of God, said, no, no. Now is the time that the Lord will be high and lifted up and seated on his throne. And I say that today. On the day after the election, God will still be on his throne, no matter who we vote for, no matter who wins that election. You believe that? You believe God's going to be afraid of whoever's elected as president of the United States? You believe God is afraid of who he or she will appoint to the Supreme Court? You think God is sitting up in heaven wringing his hands about the situation? Of course not. Do you think God cannot control, no matter who's in there, can control the affairs of man? We know that he can. Uzziah may be off his throne, but God is still on his throne. As Psalm 45:6 reminds us, your throne, O God, is forever and ever. A scepter of righteousness is the scepter of your kingdom. Let me tell you something. If you want to write this down in your notes, look at me. God is not term limited. Your throne, O God, is forever and ever. Doesn't that make you feel good? You know, there are people on every news station. I don't care if it's Fox, I don't care if it's CNBC, ABC, NBC, CBS. There are people who appear on every single newscast who are trying to manipulate and scare you so that they can make a buck. I was listening to talk radio the other day. I was in the car and just happened to be on that station. I bumped a preset station. I was listening to a radio commentator that if I said his name, you would know exactly who I was talking about. And he sounded like a tinfoil hat Chicken Little. And all it was to sell his books and promote the guys that were sponsoring him to buy gold because the world's coming to an end. God is not term limited. And we must not be manipulated and fooled. God is on His throne. There were some things that Isaiah said about Him that we need to remember. First of all, He is high. He is high. He is high and lifted up. Look at verse 1 again. I saw the Lord sitting on His throne, high and lifted up. Listen, God has a perspective that we don't have. God is high and lifted up. God can see things that we can't see. God knows things that we don't know. And we just have to trust Him. Secondly, not only is He high, He is huge. The train of the robe filled the temple. Now this was not, we got a good sized church house here, you know, it's good, it's open and all. The temple, I don't know if you've ever read the description of the temple that was around when Isaiah was around, but it probably was about the size of Bristol. It was huge. Dozens and dozens of what we now call city blocks were covered by the temple. He is huge, and the train of His robe filled the temple. You see, our problems are big, but God is bigger. He is high. He is huge. He is holy. That's the best part of all this. They sang, "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty." Verse 3 tells us, the whole earth is full of His glory. He is holy. He is other than. He is separate. God is not worried about what goes on in the electoral college. I guarantee it. And then finally, He is here. He is here. We sing the song, He is here, hallelujah. He is here, amen. The whole earth is full of His glory. God has not left us. God has not forsaken us. He didn't forsake Judah and Isaiah. He is not going to forsake us. He is here. He is high. He is huge. And He is holy. And notice what happened when Isaiah saw God. Look at verse 5. So I said, "Woe is me, for I am undone, because I am a man of unclean lips, and I dwell in the midst of a people of unclean lips. For my eyes have seen the King, the Lord of hosts." And let me tell you, that kind of humility is what our country needs to get back on the right track. It says, "Lord, you are high and lifted up. I am nothing." It's not what I can do. It's what you can do. It's about us coming back to God and saying, "God, you need to control what we do." And what we want to talk about, the problems in the world, when we need to look at the problems with us, the people of God, first. That's what Isaiah did. When he encountered God and high and holy, he said, "Woe is me." The preeminent prophet of his day fell down on his face. Listen, yes, we need a revival in the White House. Yes, we need a revival in the State House. But we need a revival in the church house. What does it mean to see and seek God? And I don't want to take this out of context. I don't want to put words in the mouth of the writer of 2 Chronicles. Because God was speaking to the Israelite people. He was speaking to Isaiah. But there are connections between the two when He said, "If my people," talking about the Jewish people. Well, who are we now? We are His people as well. "If my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then will I hear from heaven and will forgive their sins and heal their land." Listen, it takes us first on our face, supplicating and prayer for our nation, prayer for our leaders, prayer that God will not abandon us. Even though many times we have abandoned Him, we need to come back to God. And it may start right here at First Baptist Bristol and other churches like it today going into the election. Look what happened after Isaiah humbled himself, after he broke down, after all of this. Look at verse 6 and 7. It says, "Then one of the seraphim flew to me, having in his hand a live coal, which he had taken with the tongs from the altar. And he touched my mouth with it, and said, Behold, this has touched your lips. Your iniquity is taken away, and your sin is purged." You see, this is the very moment that God called Isaiah to a new level of prophecy, to a new level of serving Him. Maybe what we think is the worst of times is really the best of times. Isaiah was called into a greater role as a national statesman, as a national prophet, all because King Uzziah died. He fell on his face in the house of the Lord and saw God face to face. Maybe that's what we need. Maybe that's what the worst of times can turn into the best of times, when God can use a national tragedy, a national moral failure, a national whatever, to humble us enough that we'll listen to Him. I don't know if that's what's going on here or not, but it's some food for thought, for sure. It's the best time to see and seek God. It's the best time to step up in our spiritual growth and depth. It is the best time to say, Lord, show me. Isaiah was in the temple. Isaiah, in his grief, went to church. These seemingly worst of times will reveal who are the sheep and who are the goats, even among us. You see, our source is not our retirement. Our source is not Social Security. Our source is not a government handout. Our source is not a national economy. Our source is the river of life that flows from God. That's our source. It will reveal who will sit on the hands and who will stand up and be counted. Look at verse 8. Also I heard the voice of the Lord saying, Whom shall I send? And who will go for us? Then Isaiah said, Here am I. Send me. We need more Christians to stand up and say, Lord, here I am. Here am I. Send me. Lord, here, use me in whatever happens. And then it's the best time, as I close, to shine His light in a dark world. Right? To shine His light in a dark world. Look at verse 9. And He said, Go and tell this people, keep on hearing, but do not understand. Keep on seeing, but do not perceive. It is the best time to take His light. Even if people don't listen, even if they won't hear us, even if they won't see it, it's the best time to be a witness for the living God. And then finally, to select political leaders that reflect biblical values. Now that is up to each one of us individually. I can't tell you who represents biblical values. I can't tell you who God's choice is in this election. Oh, I wouldn't even try. What I can tell you is listen to the Holy Spirit. Listen to God's Word. Listen as an individual. Vote your conscience according to what God has taught us here today and all through your life and all through His Word. Number 2, I want to challenge you. Look at me. Pray for our country. Pray for our leaders. You're already in the house of God. And we're already experiencing a tragedy in a lot of ways in the political process. He said, she said, we said, they said. Our country's probably never been more divided than it is right now, politically. It takes God's people. It takes God's people to care about this nation, to care about the biblical values, and get on their faces before God and seek His face. Can we do that together today? Can we look to this altar, publicly pray for our nation, publicly pray for this election, publicly pray for our political leaders as Paul told us to do? Can we do that? Can we ask God to save us from this mess we've gotten ourselves into? Can we ask Him today? Can we be that church today? Can we be God's people today doing that together? I want to ask you to stand. We're not going to sing anything today. I'm going to ask the instrumentalists just to come play and play quietly. I'm going to ask you, I'll be at the front, I'm going to be praying for our nation. I ask you to join me. I ask you to come and join me and see God high and lifted up in His house and pray with me. Lord, I love you and I thank you for this message. I thank you for giving it to us thousands of years ago but how close it is to what we're facing today. Lord, I pray for our people today. I pray for our country. I pray for the needs. I pray for this altar right now, Lord. If there are those who are led to come and to pray, Lord, I pray you'll hear our prayers. They will be honest and open prayers. Lord, you will heal our land. I pray this in your name. As every head is bowed and every eye is closed, this is not a spectacle. I'll be down here at the front praying. I ask you to join me to pray for our nation.